Hi, my name is Michael Lambert. I do have a middle name, Lewis. Uh, the name didn't come from anything except my parents liked the name Michael, I guess. I know my mom never liked the name Mike, so she nicknamed me Mickey. But we lived in Vermont until I was 10, and then when I moved, I never liked the name Mickey, so I promised, or made her promise that my name would be Mike from that point on. And at that point, she agreed, I guess. Anyway, we moved to New York State at that point, and I have a sister. She's 2 years older than myself, and lots of relatives on
Not just
side.
one sister you have.
I have just the one sister, right? And her name is Carol. She lives up in Westchester at this point. And my parents, my mom is deceased at this point. They're both Vermonters originally, and my dad is still alive. We get together about every other day at this point. I see a lot of him.
He lives down here then.
Actually, we moved him down here a year ago. He's in a nursing home now up in Port Jeff. So
How long when did your mom die?
I was trying to think, about 11 years ago now. 11 years this spring, I believe.
What was her maiden name, Mike?
Her name was Margareta, first name, and her last name was Parks.
Ah.
And
And they're both native Vermonters?
they're both native Vermonters, away in the northern part of Vermont, way up in the cold climate.
Where? What's the nearest big city or?
They're 30 some odd miles northeast of Burlington, about 20 miles south of the border, right central northern.
And that's where you grew up in there?
Grew up there till I was 10, and then we moved to the Adirondacks. And then I got my college education up in Plattsburgh. And then I came down here because they were hiring on like crazy.
Okay. All right, let's hold that off for sure. Let's talk about your family situation now. You live on Long Island, obviously, even though you're retired, you're living on Long Island.
I live in Sayville. Been there 33 years in Sayville. Yes, 33. Moved there in 1970. We lived in Oakdale for 2 years before we moved there.
And your wife just recently retired?
Yes, my wife is Alice. Actually, we met teaching here at Brentwood. And the romance started and went from there. And then she taught until our first child was born here in Brentwood. And then she retired to raise the children. And when they got to be school age, she went back to work, but she went to William Floyd. At that point, she taught in the William Packer School District.
Talk about your children.
Yeah, Gail was born. Gail is my oldest. Gail with a Y, as we say. And she was named after her grandmother on Alice's side. And she was born in 1970. That makes her, 32 at this point. She'll be 33 this year. Of course, being a little girl, and she's always been the apple of my eye. She could never do anything wrong, as my wife says. And she lives, actually, she's had quite an interesting life. She's a social worker. She got her bachelor's degree at Potsdam, SUNY School, and got her master's degree at Boston University. And she worked in Boston for 2 years after she graduated, and then she worked 3 or 4 years in Minnesota. Now she's back on Long Island. She and her husband live up in Sound Beach, and that's more current at this point.
Give me a kind of a glimpse of her personality, her talents, her abilities.
Well, you're speaking to somebody who's very prejudiced.
Good. That's the intent.
She's quite a person. Her social work is they call it macro social work. She's an advocate. She works now at R.O.B.S, which is a shelter for homeless, and she helps them get their different claims from the social services and helps them find houses to live in and things like that. When she was in Boston, she did a lot of community organizing in the projects and places like that. And then in Minnesota, she worked with children at risk, and she worked with them after school and did trips with them and counseled them and so on. So
she's a people person.
Yes, she is.
Like her father, and I guess like her mother.
Yeah, yes, definitely like her mother.
Now, does she have a brother?
Yes, and then I have a son, David. He's 3 years younger. He was born in 1973. He'll be 30 this year. And he went to Keene State up in New Hampshire. He studied computer drafting, mechanical design, I guess it was called. And he met a lovely lady called Trish, and got married, and now they live up in New Hampshire. They built a beautiful big house up there, huge house, and they have our first grandchild, Shay, and they have. We spend quite a bit of time up there now, and they.
I take it it sounds like he took after some of your.
The mechanical part of it, yeah, the mathematical, yes.
Did they both go to school in Sayville?
Yeah, they're both graduates of Sayville High School.
Are there recognizable traits that both of your children, or one, or either of your children have that you have seen in the family before your own generation, maybe earlier on?
I know, I never thought about it. They're both very gentle people, both very concerned about other people. They're just genuinely very nice people.
Okay.
A lot of people make compliments about them to me over the years.
That's wonderful.
How nice they are. And
so where I was headed with the question is that sometimes people have certain occupations that keep popping up down the generations, or certain qualities that take them in certain career fields, and I just wondered if that were the case. That
other than, like, my daughter was a people field.
Yes. Okay.
And then, of course, my son interested with computers. I guess I brought them home when I was working here, and I always had computers around. And
so you have a lot of contact, or at least a good deal of contact, with your son and your grandchildren.
Yeah, we go up there 3-4 weeks at a time sometimes. And
now, describe some of your earliest memories, being born in Vermont and growing up there through a young age, as long as you were there. What are some of the earliest?
Well, we lived back out of town. My father started raising chickens. We had 2 huge chicken houses. It never ever made a go of it, so he always had a second job, being at lumber mill for a while, and he worked asbestos mines for a long time. And when the chicken farm just put us under just about, he was going down to Connecticut to look for a job. He heard they were hiring on, and he got down as far as what they call the Crown Point Bridge going to New York, and he found out they were hiring in the iron ore mines over in the Adirondacks, a little town called Port Henry in Mineville, Witherby area. And so he went over there and got the job, and that's how we ended up in the Adirondacks.
Now, when you say got a job as a miner?
Yeah, they were underground iron ore mines. Yeah, it was.
And you mentioned asbestos. Did your father work?
Yeah, he worked in the asbestos mines too in Vermont for a period of time. They're open pit mines there. He did several things. He was a blacksmith there for a while, and he drove truck there for a while.
These are in the days before OSHA or any safety precautions too.
Right. And yet he never had any problems with it.
Thank goodness.
Actually, his brother worked in the mill part of it, where asbestos fibers used to float right through the air. You couldn't see the other side of the room, and he never had any problems with it. Yeah, I guess you have to have a certain tendency towards that.
Now, I asked you before, but tell me about your mother, the main name, and what you know of her family and her history.
Well, my mom was born in northern Vermont, and went to school in Swanton, Vermont, up there. Her father which my grandfather had many different jobs. He had some kind of clothing shirt shop in Burlington for a while, and I know he worked for a Burlington Free Press for a long time when I knew him. She went to Johnson Normal School. That's where she met my father, because he lived in the town of Johnson, Vermont. And she was a school teacher. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse in Vermont, and then she taught in New York State, where we moved back.
You see what I mean about careers?
Yes,
that's sure. Did your father meet her while she was teaching school?
Yes. Actually, my father was down here. He worked for a tree company at that time, tree trimming company, and he was working on a lot of the estates over in old Westbury. And he had to come home, and there was a dance going on at the college where my mother was going, and they met. And
so it sounds like
went back home and stayed there.
It sounds like your mother was the one with the formal education, at least college education,
right?
And it sounds like your father was picking up work where he could find it, which suggests that he didn't have the same level of education.
My father is the mathematical side. I think that's where I get it from. He's more the logic side. My mother was an English major, but had nothing to do with mathematics whatsoever.
What are some of the childhood memories you have of your mother, Mike?
What
did she enjoy doing?
I was trying to think. She was always a organization person. She was very involved in the church. She was elder there in the church for a while, and we ran the youth group.
What church would that have been?
It was a Presbyterian church that was right there in Adirondacks-Port Henry. It was a congregational church. She wasn't involved in much. We lived in Vermont. It was more or less just taking care of us. Then she was a teacher. She was president of the Teachers Union for a number of years. And after she retired, she was president of the town Chamber of Commerce, things like that. So she was an organization person.
She stayed plugged in.
Yes.
Very much.
She did.
And your father and his family background and occupations of what you know?
Yeah, my grandfather on my father's side was a carpenter. He was a carpenter for the railroad there in Vermont for a number of years. He had what they call a small gentleman's farm. He lived right just going out of town, but it's really in town. He always had like one cow and a couple chickens and whatever. And so we had all our supply of milk, and he had his big garden and so on. And he lived pretty much that kind. My grandmother, his wife on my father's side, was a big churchgoer. She was always the one in town who always made sure that if something happened to the family, she was always there helping out.
So it sounds like that was an inheritance from both sides of the family. Then there is a very spiritual commitment on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there certain memories or early memories of your father or growing up that my question will trigger? Because it sounds idyllic to me. I mean, the gentleman farm, the chickens and cows, it sounds almost so rural.
Well, yeah, I guess if you want to look at that, I mean, as a child, it was a great place to grow up. I mean, we lived just outside of town ourselves, and there was we had the chicken farm, but there was a farm below us that raised cattle, and the farm above us had cattle and horses and things, and we pretty much had the run between the three farms and did what we wanted to. We had a big river going down through, did a lot of fishing down there.
Did you have, I don't remember if we talked about this before, but were you an only child, or were there?
No, I have one sister.
That's right. You mentioned your sister.
That's right. And she has two children, two girls.
That's right. You did mention that. What are their names, by the way, Mike?
Yes, my nieces are Lisa and Linda. And
is there much contact there?
Yes. Lisa lives here in Center Moriches, and in fact, she was just visiting us this morning. She has two little boys. One's in kindergarten, one's in second grade. And Linda, the younger one, has a little girl who's about a little over a year old now. And we get together quite often.
Is there a word or a couple of words you could use to describe what your life was like growing up?
I guess if you can visualize country scene, kids just running around the meadows and where else and just doing whatever came natural for the day. Pretty much it. Yeah.
Were there other adult influences other than, it sounds like you knew your grandparents, all your grandparents, but besides your mother and father, and let me ask it that way. Besides your mother and father, were there other adult influences that had?
I think some of my teachers were a big influence on me. Not so much in Vermont in my younger years, but after we moved to the Adirondacks into New York State, I had some teachers that were, my math teacher was a big influence on me, and my coach, believe it or not. I played 3 sports in high school, and I think mentally the coach taught me quite a bit, really, on how to handle myself and in adverse situations, and just applying yourself, I guess, putting 120% into what you do. I think I really got from my coach.
Who was the person that influenced what you did here in Brentwood, that career choice?
Actually, my math teacher. We had a very small school. It was a village school. They've consolidated now, and it's 3 different villages in the township is one school. But when I went there was 3 different little village schools. So we only graduated anywhere between 20 and 40 students a year. And by the time I got to my junior year, I was like 5 in my math class, and my senior year I was 1 of 3. So it was like individual tutoring almost.
Yeah.
And he had quite a way of working with us, and I always liked math. Math was always my favorite subject, and I sat there, I think my junior year, and I started saying, I got to start figuring out what I like to do.
This is in high school?
This is in high school.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I want to work with people. And I even thought about being a minister at one point. And I said, I'm
not surprised to hear that.
I'm just not that good with words, per se. And math's always been, I said, I could see myself doing what this math teacher's doing, because I really liked the way he handled the students, and was just made math exciting.
Yes.
And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do for a living.
Okay. And speaking of doing things for a living, do you remember your first paying job?
Yes. My first paying job, actually, I think I was a freshman, 8th grade or 9th grade. I'm not sure which it was. I got a paper route.
Okay.
And you got to realize the town I lived in was built on the side of a mountain. You never went straight. You're either going straight uphill or straight downhill. Except Main Street, you went across maybe about 200 yards. And
was there a bicycle involved?
Yeah, you could usually end up pushing the bike uphill and coasting it downhill, because with 60 papers on the front of it, you never was able to go uphill with it. And there were days where it was 20 below on them. We went out in the morning. It was a morning paper.
Important lessons learned, like responsibility and some people skills, no doubt, right? Talking to.
Yeah, I guess so. It was pretty early in the morning. Collecting money was a chore sometimes. And then my second job.
Folding the papers, was that part of it?
Yeah, folding the papers. And, my second job was the summer of between my junior and senior year of high school. And I worked in a restaurant washing dishes up in Plattsburgh, the town I ended up going to college in. It's through the same person who had the paper. He was the boss. The paper had a inn or a motel, I guess, and restaurant up in Plattsburgh. So I worked up there in the summertime.
Mike, was there a family holiday that was more important than the others?
Trying to think. Well, Thanksgiving was always a big holiday. It was always at one of the grandparents, and all the relatives came. And it was probably that, and we usually spent Christmas actually with my father's parents quite a bit, so that was a pretty good holiday.
What about your interests as a kid? What did you like to do?
I love sports. In the summertime, before I had the jobs, we just play baseball all summer.
Okay.
We get 3 guys together, go to the ball field and play with 3 guys. Wintertime, we had a cement. It was a building that was torn down, so we had this big cement floor, and we put up a basket. We'd play basketball all winter.
Did you follow any teams at that time?
Yeah, actually, the Brooklyn Dodgers were a big one because one of the big pitchers back then, Johnny Padres, was from my hometown.
I see.
So, of course, we all had a root for him.
Yeah.
So that was our team.
Has this changed, or have you always been one or the other, a morning person or an evening person?
Actually, it's changed. I think I was always an evening person up until I got older.
Yes.
And now I find myself much better in the morning. I give out in the evening now.
Okay.
Has to do with age, I believe.
When you were growing up, like I'm talking about when you were a child, do you remember any of the toys that you played with that were really significant to you or you loved?
Yeah, I love building blocks. My grandmother always had a box of spools left over. She did a lot of sewing. I love playing with those. We had Lincoln logs, naturally, and I had a Rector set that I played with infinitum.
Did you then and now have a favorite season of the year?
I guess I liked the fall time a lot when I was younger. Now I enjoy the summers more.
Yeah.
I guess
We used to have the aroma of burning leaves. We don't have that
anymore. Right.
With environmental.
I think my wife has sort of soured me on the fall time now because she doesn't like the fall. She says everything's dying. So.
Going to sleep for a while. That's how about aromas that occasionally will trigger for you a memory of long ago? Are there any aromas, either of I was just thinking of natural aromas like at seasons of the year, or of foods perhaps that trigger memories?
But you mentioned one thing. Back when our children were young, we decided to go back to Johnson, the town I grew up in, and I'd been there maybe, at that point, maybe 30 years. And other than just passing through or something like that, but never stopping, walking down Main Street. And we were walking down Main Street, and we walked into the drugstore. And I'm telling you, the smell triggered right there. All of a sudden, I never smelled, it's just a certain smell in that drugstore. That said, it was like deja vu, and it was like, just came back. And then, of course, the woman came out behind it. It was like an ice cream counter. Had the same pink smock on that I remember they used to wear back 30 years ago. And it sounds strange. It was like Twilight Zone at that point because we ordered ice cream cones for the kids. And ice cream cones were going like for $1.50 down here at the time. And she charged us 10 cents. They were small cones, you know.
Yeah.
But we took quite a back from it, and she noticed that reaction, and she said, well, we just raised them from a nickel just about a year ago. So it was old time, that's for sure.
Wow. It's remarkable how there is like a time warp in certain places that seem to be
that's exactly the word, time warp.
Yeah. What was the first full day school you attended?
Actually, my first full day school was first grade. They didn't have a kindergarten in Vermont, but it was a state college there. And my aunt at that time, my father's sister, was going there. And they did take in children for a month or 2 months, I don't remember exactly, to sort of practice on them. So this is interesting. So we lived about a mile from there. And my mother didn't drive at that time. So the first day, my mom and my father drove me there. My father had to get to work right away. So they just sort of dropped me off and said, just go through the front door and your Aunt Ginny's going to be there waiting for you. So they dropped me off. They watched me go up by the door, and then they took off. My father get to work. Well, I pulled on this door. The handle was like over my head. I just couldn't budge it. And I panicked. And I ran all the way home. And they this day didn't know how I knew how to go home because I'd never done it. And my mother was home, and of course, not being able to drive, she got phone calls. Being a small town, everybody knew everybody. Phone calls all the way down the street saying, "I think that's your son running down the street crying." It says, "But he's heading your direction." That was my first day of school.
That's memorable.
I never forgot it. I can still visualize trying to reach for that door. And
Take us through all
I
this.
wasn't too keen either in
About-
first grade about going to school either.
Not after that. I would.
It was third grade before I started even feeling that school was for me.
Take us through chronologically the schools that you did attend after that.
I went to, of course, the elementary school in
Yes.
Johnson, Vermont. I think actually one of the teachers in that played a very big role in how I became, not how I became a teacher, but the type of teacher I became. I had a second grade teacher that ruled by the heavy hand. And I remember sitting there saying that I would never do this. And it always stuck with me. So I could never be a heavy-handed disciplinarian. Maybe that's why I end up teaching 11th and 12th graders, because I have to, my disciplinarian technique is to get them interested and keep them busy. I can't yell, I can't hit, I can't, it's just not me. So I think that played a big part. And even though it was negative, it played a very positive role in my life. So there's good things come out of everything.
And
then after that, we went, of course, moved to New York State. Went to Port Henry High School, I'd mentioned before. And graduated from there and got my bachelor's degree from Plattsburgh State. And then started teaching, and then got my equivalent to master's through C.W. Post and back up to Plattsburgh in the summer times.
Okay. What year was it, Mike, that you first came to Brentwood?
That was 1964. Let me fill you in a little bit of gap right in between.
Yeah, sure.
In Plattsburgh, I was very involved in student government. I was vice president of my freshman class. I was president of my sophomore class. I was vice president of student government my junior year, and I lost the presidency by 5 votes my senior year. But I was always involved in organizations like that too, I guess. And then when I started looking for a job, I came down here. I had an interview at Smithtown High School, and just Smithtown High School. And my roommate had an interview at the junior high in Sachem District. And I drove down, so I drove him to the interview at the junior high in Sachem. And they said, "Well, while you're here, why don't you interview also?" So I interviewed there also, and then I interviewed at Smithtown. Smithtown told me it would be a month before the board met, so they wouldn't be able to get back to me. When I got back home, I got a telegram from Sachem District saying I had a contract if I wanted it. So I wanted to come down here, so I said a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So I took that job. And I did my student teaching in high school. I had no clue what junior high meant. How hard could it be? So I took that job. Worst experience of my life. I almost quit teaching. I hated teaching junior high. It just wasn't my age group.
Right.
If I saw another fraction, I thought I was going to throw up. And it just, the antsy, I just wasn't my personality. So that's when I started looking for a high school job. And high school job up here in Brentwood, and my department chair was put in a good word. He knew Mr. Kurlick, who was the principal here. And I got the job here. So that was I came down in 1963 and worked 1 year in the Sachem District, and then I started Brentwood in 64.
64. Who interviewed you here? Was it Bill Kurlick?
I spoke to Bill Kurlick, Stan Jankowski, and Fred Weaver all together in one room.
And where did that take place?
Right in the Sondling, I think Fred Weaver's office at that point. I might have Stan Jankowski's office, but all three of them.
If it was in the Sondling, it must have been Stan's office, right?
Yeah, probably was Stan's office.
Right. Do you remember any question you were asked during the interview? Or anything that happened during the interview?
No, it was pretty straightforward.
Okay.
I remember being quite tired that day. I was kind of exasperated with teaching anyway, because I was in this junior high, and I was pretty frank with him. I told him I was leaving the junior high because I didn't like it, and And they asked me questions about this, how would I handle this discipline and so on and so forth. And I was pretty frank with them. I told them I wasn't a heavy-handed person, but I like to make people interested in things like that. It's worked out for.
So from that point on, I assumed that it went well. You got the job and you started in 1964. What were your first impressions of?
Felt like I'd gone from hell to heaven.
Really?
What a different atmosphere between teaching junior high and high school. Loved it.
Yeah.
The moment I walked into a regular, high school class, I had a Math 11 class then. Actually, Stan's daughter was in that class. Stan Yankowski's daughter was in that class. And several of the students came back here, several. One went in that class I know taught at Sachem later, and one came back here, and that was a science teacher. I've forgotten his last name. Was in that class. And another class I had Kent Perkowski, was Ginny's son, and they were just nice young adults.
You're talking about
they weren't
the
children.
young man who became the filmmaker.
Yes.
Furrowed
Yes.
into cinematography.
Yes.
Okay.
It was a whole different type of personality. It seemed to fit my personality.
Yes.
Sure. And I really enjoyed it. I said, this is what I went into it for. Actually, it was the same experience I had student teaching. I did student teaching in high school. And I guess that was my level that I worked best with.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Brentwood was always a place where you could make mistakes because it was very easy to get forgiveness here for the things that there were always somebody willing to help you and to teach you.
But
sometimes it was easier to get forgiveness.
It was just that age group. I was able to, you can talk to them, you can reason with them.
Yes.
Junior high, the hormones are just starting to activate or something. It's like, I just don't know what's going on here.
Do you have any fun memories from those first couple of years of people you worked with or things that happened in the early years?
The first few years I got involved with advisorships to the junior class and the senior class. And in fact, I worked with a very nice gentleman called John Sherin. Taught me quite a bit of ropes, and he and I did lots of stuff for the junior class advisor, junior class, right? And then right after that, in 1966,
I still feel guilty about that train ride, Mike.
Why is that?
You remember that?
Yes. But we did that twice. Once with you, and then I did it once with John Lehman when he was senior, and we had
rent a whole Long Island Railroad train, take a slow ride out to Greenport, and bring a band and refreshments.
And the hardest part was chaperoning the students to make sure they didn't have any alcohol and things like that. And that was...
Well, it wasn't as if they could go any place because they were on the train.
Right, exactly. Right.
Do you remember an event where I believe we were co-sponsoring a junior class at that time? We did a Western dance.
Yes, I remember that.
And I remember ordering a couple of bales of hay. And we spread the hay all over the cafeteria floor to give an authentic...
Yeah, I'd forgotten about it. The image is coming back.
A barn, a feeling. And as soon as we had done it, we were made aware that there were people with allergies that we couldn't, it couldn't remain. So we had to sweep it all up and get it out of there. Yeah. Oh, boy. Some great times. Do you always teach the same grades, Mike?
Well, in the high school, it was 10, 11, 12, and sometimes I had 10, 10, 11, sometimes 11, 12, sometimes 10 and 12. Actually, in 1966, I was senior class advisor. John Lehman came at the time, and those years we were appointed. It wasn't applied for. It wasn't a job, naturally. We just had to do some curriculum lecture. And Alice, my wife now, was appointed senior class advisor, and that's actually where we met.
I see.
We went on a train ride together. We went on a ski trip together. We sort of got together that way. There was another teacher here, Andre Lamar, I don't remember that. He actually, I'd seen Alice at our meetings, and I said, somebody nice, gorgeous as that must have 1,000 boyfriends. and I was too bashful to ask her. So one day she came for a meeting, and Andre called her in to the room we're sitting in and said, got a question to ask you. I said, what? Are you dating anybody? She looked at him like, what are you asking for? She said, no. She says, good. Mike wanted to know. So from that point on, we sort of hit it off, and the rest is history. Actually, a lot happened since then. She's Jewish, and religion to me is important, but which religion is not important? To me, they're all the same. I have my own feeling about religion, and I'm a very religious person, but how I go about it is inside of me, not what the institution says. So I converted, and I've been very active in our temple over the years. I've been president of the temple, and I've been treasurer several times. And in fact, now for the last 10 years, I've been chairperson of the what they call the President's Council. It's all the different synagogues in Suffolk County. I'm president of their lay leader organization. So I got active in that. Again, another organization person, I guess. So I keep busy with that.
Runs in the family, Mike.
I guess so. My wife is, I brag a little bit about my wife too. She's very much into organizations too. She's run our religious school she's been the principal of that now volunteered doing that for the last 30 years, I believe. We grew from about 50 students, we're up to about 300 and some odd students now. And she's voted on the Suffolk County Human Rights Commission, and also the Women's Advisory Commission in Suffolk County. So she's involved in a lot of things.
Before I ask the next question, I want to clarify something. Before I said I felt guilty about the train ride, the reason I felt guilty is because you and I worked on that whole thing, set it all up, and then I didn't go on the train ride.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I didn't go because I was working in music at the time. And I had an engagement at that time, and so I just want to clarify, that's where the guilt came in, because I felt like I was there, and then suddenly I wasn't there. Who were some of the people, Mike, I wanted to ask you, who were some of the other people that you worked with? A lot of single people that come into the district, many people like yourself and Alice were falling in love and starting families. We were all young.
That's what's really nice about Brentwood. I always felt it was an extension of college, because we're all hired at the same time. We're all the same age. So when we sat down and talked or did things or got together, first we were single and we went to parties together. Then we got married and we talked about first being married. Then we all had children at the same time. We talked about the children and we got together. In fact, when Alice retired from here to raise the children, they had what they call a play school, I guess, because there was Bev and Ralph Ruggiero and Paul and Mary Kerensky, John and Durant and his wife, and there was another one, her last name was Quinn, I can't remember the first name now, it's out here. They all had children at the same time.
Okay.
And so, because they're all home, pulling their hair out, they had a play school, so every week they went to somebody else's house, and that's all the children got together and played, and so it sort of stayed as a Brentwood thing, and stayed in touch with.
Story, yeah. Did you have any other assignments other than what you taught in the 10, 11, 12 years? Were there other assignments or activities or involvements that you had here?
I helped coach baseball a couple of years. Okay. It was just a volunteer type of thing with Dick Roth. And I did umpiring for a number of years.
Okay.
Jerry McCarthy and I were a team.
Yes.
I enjoyed doing that. And then I've been keeping score for the basketball team here. I started, I think, my second year in Brentwood, and I'm still doing it.
Okay, Mike.
How
about some of the people, the names of the people that started with you when you first began teaching in the district?
Believe it or not, a lot of them right through with me, and stayed very close friends, like Paul Kerensky and Mike Campanile came, I think, a little bit later, but a couple of years after. We stayed very close friends. Paul and myself, we still go to Saratoga every summer for 3-4 days together. Have a lot of laughs, talk about Brentwood, things like that.
You had a job description, obviously, as a classroom teacher, but you had a purpose for getting up every day and coming in every morning and doing what you did. How did you define your own purpose?
I guess I don't know if you call it purpose or not. I always want to do something I thought I would enjoy. I mean, I was probably taught that early childhood, you're going through life, do something you enjoy. And I enjoy working with people. And I guess that's what I liked about teaching too, because it wasn't the same all the time. Even the subject matter changed because I had so many different groups, but I could have 2 classes back to back being the same subject, and I would teach them totally different because the clientele was different. And I guess it was just enjoyable being up there. Sometimes you're a ham in a class, sometimes you were, very serious in a class. It's just, I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed actually, I'd like to say this too, I don't know if I enjoyed it in some school districts as much as I did Brentwood. Brentwood is such a melting pot of different nationalities, and I've told this to so many people over the years that there have been different upheavals in the world, and we have the Vietnamese that came in for a while, then we had the Cambodians that came in, then we had the Haitians that came in, we had the El Salvadorians come in, and I got to know each group. I mean, I didn't have to travel any place. You got to know their personalities, their culture, and they all just melted here. They all were like one big family, and I enjoyed that a lot because I grew up in a very small, isolated, small towns, and I never had that exposure.
Yeah.
And I love studying people, I guess, and trying to understand their personalities, and now I understand more than that. The people is their combination of where they grew up and their customs, and Brentwood offered me that, which was, I would have to pay to get that education, and so I got a tremendous education out of all this.
Without even traveling to get it. Was there ever any union involvement or any BTA participation on your?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I stayed tuned into them.
Yes.
I went to a few meetings now and then. I never really tried running for office or anything like that.
Well, there's a limit to everybody's time, and there's only so many involvements that you can have. Did you have any contact with former students, or did you ever maintain contact with some of your own teachers?
Yes, there's another story. When we were senior class advisors, Alice and I was under John Lehman at the time. We had a president. His name was Tommy Smolens. Probably the most vivacious of the presidents. He just did everything. We went to his house, we did floats. He bubbled in that. And I think he graduated in 79. So, no, I'm sorry, 69. I take that back. Alice stopped teaching in 70, 69. And I lost contact with him. And I'd asked different students that would come back to teach that were in that era if they heard anything about Tommy Smolens. And they said, well, I heard one of the students, one of the people who came back to teach you said, I thought I heard he'd passed away. And I said, so sad. It turned out that he hadn't. It was another one of the presidents later on. But as I said, I was involved in the temple. And maybe about 6 years ago, we hired a part-time secretary. And when I was breaking in the full-time secretary there, I got to talking to her, and I always knew her name was Karen. I never knew her last name. And then I noticed her name was Smolens. I said, that's the name I was familiar. I said, do you know Tommy Smolens? She said, well, my husband's name was Tommy Smolens. And I thought she came and took a part-time job, maybe because I'd heard he passed away. Maybe she needed the extra money and so on. And so I didn't know quite how to say it. I said, is your husband still alive? Or first of all, she said, and I said, do you go to Brentwood? She said, oh yeah, he went to Brentwood High School. I said, oh, that's the Tommy Smolens. I said, is he still, I couldn't think how to say it.
Yeah.
Is he still alive? She said, well, he was this morning when I left. So, and from that point on, I said, that's the Tommy Smolens I've been before. And he couldn't believe We're so close. We were so close, and when he was in high school, and then we got together. He's very active in both he and his wife in their church at St. Anne's, and our temple and their church do a lot of anti-bias meetings together. We do a lot of services together sometimes.
Wonderful.
And now Dallas Religious School, they get together with the two religious schools, talk about their religions, and so it's a small world. And now we were looking for. He had just got this company he was working for, insurance company, went under. So he got another job, but he had to take quite a pay cut. So he was looking for a part-time job, and we were looking for a part-time custodian at the time. So now he's part-time custodian in our temple.
Isn't that interesting?
And she's our full-time secretary now, his wife. So,
Mike, what was the date of your retirement?
I retired in 1996. So
How did you know you were ready?
I didn't know I was ready. I always thought I'd die here with my boots on, as they say. And everybody started talking about retirement, and the incentives came down.
Yeah.
And I started putting numbers down on a piece of paper. And I found out that my take-home pay for retirement was almost the same as my take-home pay. Of course, I wouldn't take out the teachers' annuities and things like that. It'd be almost the same. And I said, if it really had anything to do with, you have one life, I guess that's what I want to say. And I've had an opportunity to have another. There's so many things to do. I've done the teaching and maybe, but we had to turn in their papers a year and a half ahead of time. And I right up the last second, I held in there because I just enjoyed teaching so much.
Sure.
Fortunately, I guess the year I did turn in the papers, I probably had one of my most upheaval classes. I had a real tough class that one year, and it didn't make it quite so hard.
Yes.
Because if it had been the next year, my last year teaching, I probably wouldn't have turned them in because I had some of the most gorgeous kids in the world.
Yes. Mike, is there something that, as you look back over the years, is there something that you were particularly proud of having accomplished? Something that you can point to and say, that really gave you some pleasure or gave you some satisfaction?
I can't think of any one single thing.
Where did you
combination? I've had a lot of students recognize me on the street.
That's neat. Yeah.
I was going to tell you one quick story. I was coming across on the New London Ferry back from upstate to Orient, and Alice and I were sitting there, and this booming voice comes from across the ferry. Mr. Lambert. I looked over. Here's this guy who looked older than me, I swear. And he came over, he had introduced his family, all his children, and he says, "You were the reason I stayed in school." He said he was a wrestler, and he said it was sports and your class. He said, "I loved your class." He said, "If it hadn't been for you and my coach," he said, "I would never have finished high school." And that gave me a lot of joy. A lot of stories like that.
That wonderful story, Mike. What's the total number of years you spent in the classroom?
33 totally,
Okay.
and 32 here in Brentwood.
Do you ever have second jobs besides the coaching or the refereeing? And
I taught summer school for 18 summers.
Okay.
When money was really tight.
And you remember your beginning salary, don't you?
Yeah, actually, as I said in Sachem, it was $5,200, and when I came to Brentwood, I got a whopping increase. I thought, this is great. I got $5,800.
Okay.
But
what have you been doing since that day?
Since I retired?
Yeah.
Seems like there's not a second a day. My calendars are packed. Of course, I'm still involved heavily with the temple. I do a lot there. I've been vice president in charge of administration the last 3 years there. Of course, my son moved to New Hampshire. We go up there and visit a lot, and my granddaughter was just born, so we spent a long time there. My son-in-law, my daughter's husband, started a construction business, and so last time he's short-handed.
You help out there?
I help out there. In fact, this past week, we just finished redoing somebody's kitchen. We knocked down walls and redid the whole thing with cabinets and things like that.
Geez, there's the carpentry in the family.
Yeah, I guess my grandfather's.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to be able to do now that you are retired, other than what you're doing? Is there anything else on the horizon or anything else on your in your 5-year plan?
No, just spend more time with son-in-law, helping him. Actually, my son-in-law and I went up when my son was building his house, and we built front porch and the back porch and did some instruction for them somewhat, and visit my granddaughter a lot. And the last 2 years, I've taken up, the rabbi got me into taking up golf with him. I never played golf, so I've been trying to get to the golf course a little more often. I enjoy it as a game, sports, and something for my my age. And actually, believe it or not, my wife started joining the gym just before she retired. So we've been going to the gym 2-3 times a week, and feel a lot healthier than I was when I was working.
That's a real growth choice, absolutely.
And actually, I ran in a Sable race last summer in 90-degree heat. Was it a 4-mile race? I came in third in my age class. So
incredible.
Yeah. That heat kept the number of people running down some, so it helped me as far as running up there. So I did well.
If there's anything that you could have done differently, Mike, is there something that you would have?
I always thought about that. I guess I've always said that if I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing. Each part of my life has been a plateau. I never wanted to go back and redo it because there's always another plateau I wanted to do. But I have no regrets.
Are you a reader?
I'm very lucky.
Are you a reader at all?
Yes and no. I don't like reading fiction.
Okay.
I like reading real things. I read a lot of how to do things. I read the newspaper from cover to cover when I get a chance. And the books I've been reading are mainly, this is probably my father's side. He always liked history, but they're political books.
Okay.
I'm a diehard liberal, so...
name one of the books that you've read in the last few years.
Sleepwalking Through History by Johnson, the Reagan eras.
Okay.
The title apropos of my feelings on that. I've been presently reading Bush at War. Can't remember the author's name. Woodward, John Woodward.
Okay.
And my wife just picked another book up. I just started a couple pages. Vidal's the author, something to do again with the Iraq War, Blood and Oil or something.
Oh, yes. Is there anything that you would like to have been able to accomplish that you weren't able to finish or you weren't able to do?
Now, it wasn't just math I taught. I got heavily involved in computers, teaching computer languages here and things like that. And I worked in the computer lab. I had less classes, and I had some periods in the computer lab. I did a lot in that. I worked with Tony DeMarco.
Yes.
And I enjoyed working with computers a lot. And when I did retire, I do have a DBA, I do in business as. I do some software. I forgot to mention that. I write some software. Had a couple companies, now I'm down to one company. Mainly in the wintertime when their business is slow.
You know the HTML and all of that?
I haven't got too much on the internet. It's more database file programming. I do a lot of that. I got these jobs because it's the old language. A lot of it now is in the new Windows-based. But I do a lot in the Clipper language and DBase type languages. And I do enough to keeps me in money to buy my own toys and computers and things like that.
How about, Mike, advice? Were you to be able to give some advice to young people or people coming into the field now that we're going to be doing what you or I did? And what advice might your experience be to them now at this point in your life?
I don't know. I'm quite taken by the young teachers. I know the few young teachers they hired before I retired, and they hired some very intelligent ones. A lot of them were Brentwood graduates that were in the honors program here, and I watched them, and they're very good. I think they're better than we were when we started. I mean, we grew over the years.
I sure think they're more qualified when they're beginning.
Yes, I think so. I think they're
many of these people come from other backgrounds with other experience already. We came right out of school.
Sort of threw us right into the hopper, and with very little experience. And
but then again, it's a very different job market today than it was when we started.
That's true. And I thought I became a good teacher when I started having my own children. Before then, I was playing the role of a teacher. what I thought was a role of a teacher. But I never had that real sensitivity to the students' feelings. I always base it on my feelings, but
Yes.
once I started basing it on how I wanted them to treat my children, then I thought I really become much more compassionate and much better teacher, much more understanding is the word, not
What do
compassion.
they need?
Right. What do they need?
Yes. What are we forgetting?
And I started looking at them instead of a classroom of students. I started looking at them as individuals.
Okay.
And I think that's when I really became a good teacher. Is when I started really teaching individuals and not the classroom. That was a biggie. And I guess if there was any advice, there was a paper put out here we read too. Something that was handed out at one of our meetings that always struck me. And it says it's not your fault. Don't take it personal. When a student comes in and he's having a bad day, usually 99.9% of the time has nothing to do with you. And most young teachers, I know I did as a first-year teacher, took it personal. And once I stopped taking it personal and realized it had nothing to do with me, I was able to work with that student and get him to diffuse a little bit. And so if there's any advice, I guess it is just remember they're individuals and not our class. You just remember to talk to everybody as an individual and not
Good
put them as a class.
sound.
It sounds good. It sounds easy. It's not. But,
No.
It's always easy to reflect and be an armchair quarterback and be in the middle of the fire. But
What did I forget to ask, Michael? What did we
I
forget
don't
to
know.
talk about?
I'll probably think of a million things.
We will. Both of us will. Absolutely.
But I think it covered my life pretty well. It's been a very happy life. I didn't talk too much about my wife, but she's probably my best friend that I ever had in my life.
You're a lucky man.
And she's just wonderful. She's, I'm going to have a tear pretty soon if I keep talking about this.
No.
You're
a very lucky man.
Yeah, she's, so you know Alice.
Yes.
She's just a wonderful person. She's talented, she's intelligent, she's just loving, she's just, I don't know how I deserve it, but
You do, Mike. You do, Michael.
I've been very fortunate, and our children have grown because of her.
But I can say, having known you for all these years, she's also a lucky woman to have the likes of you in her life.
Thank you.
And thank you for being in ours today, and for those who will enjoy listening to this.
I've been very fortunate being able to teach you in Brentwood, and I've mentioned that before too. It's been a home to me, and I enjoy it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.